Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our 69th Good Evening Britain. You've got me through until 8 o'clock tonight. Please do send in your messages. Please tell us where you're watching from. Please send in your questions and your thoughts and your comments about the previous week's politics, which we're going to be looking at in some depth as usual. We're going to be looking at the by-elections, which are happening tomorrow, 3 by-elections in England, and what will they bode for the present Conservative government and indeed next year's general election. We're going to be looking at more of our activism. I'm going to be telling you about 2 new projects which we're already started on and which are very exciting. Stick around for that. At the bottom of the hour, we've got On This Day in British History, and we'll have a question and a prize as well. And so, folks, do send in your comments. I noticed that Derek was first in the house tonight. Great stuff. That's Debbie says good evening from, I'm going to pronounce that as Cumanstown, which is up, I believe, in Aberdeenshire area near Turriff. Derek says, good evening, Alistair and fellow Unionists around the world. Hope everyone is fine and enjoying the hot weather, as they say. Melissa says, hello, as does Christopher and Rita. Good evening to Rita and Adam from the heart of rural England, Leicestershire. And hello to Kat and to AB Trains. Good to have AB Trains in the house. Was in the house last week as well, I believe. And also to Catherine. Hi, Catherine. And to Richard, who is feeling much better after having spent some time ailing for a week or so. Glad to hear you're on the mend, Richard. Good stuff. Now, folks, tomorrow there's going to be 3 by-elections, much heralded, and they're down in England. One's in North Yorkshire, one's in London, and one is in Somerset, and they are all 3 very safe, hitherto, Conservative seats. And let's just bring up the first graphic that we've got here of the by-elections that we took from the BBC website, and I just want to note 1 or 2 points here. That's the one in North Yorkshire is called Selby and Ainsty. I'm probably saying that wrong. The one in Somerset is Somerton and Frome, and the one in London is Uxbridge and South Ruslip. And there seem to be kind of fairly well-to-do areas there, but it's the next slide which tells us how strong the Conservatives are. In Selby and Ainsty, they've got a majority of 20,000, at least that's what they got last time. A vote share of 60%. In Somerton, it's around about the same, and in Uxbridge and South Ruslip, it's 53%. Now, yes, the Tories had a majority of 20,000 over Labour, but Labour think they can bridge that gap. And in Somerton and Frome, it's the Liberal Democrats who are actually well ahead of Labour in second place. And in Uxbridge and South Ruslip, the Labour are quite close behind, relatively speaking, the Tories. And the betting seems to be that these are all going to fall to Labour. Well, that would certainly be a turn up for the books. I should say that the Selby one in North Yorkshire, it's not a red wall seat. It's been Conservative, as you can see there on the right-hand side, since 2010. Okay, so for the last 13 years it's been a Tory seat. It's not one of these ones that moved from Labour to Conservative back in 2019. So if that's a safe Conservative seat and it falls to Labour, goodness me, that would be a bellwether, as they say in America, which would tend to suggest that it will be chaos for the Tories at the next general election. Somebody made a comment on Twitter, I'll just put up the tweet here, that they made about this. And Mr. Free Speech, he says, Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election will indicate the result of the general election and will very likely show two things: that Rishi as leader is the nail in the Tory coffin, and that the electorate is so locked into the two-party trap, as he calls it, that either of the globalist two will always win. That either of the two globalists will always win. Okay. So there are one or two small parties that would not call themselves globalists standing. In Uxbridge and South Ruislip, tell me how to pronounce that, somebody. Lawrence Fox's Reclaim Party is standing, and that's who I would vote for if I was down there. You know, just he talks a lot of sense on Twitter, that's for certain. Although the mass media, of course, are not in favour of him or his party. In North Yorkshire, there's another party standing called Reform UK, who are Brexiteers, and also David Curtin's Heritage Party is standing as well. These are small parties. Perhaps they might get several hundred or maybe 2,000 or 3,000 votes. I'd like to think that they could make some kind of impact anyway. They'll certainly be looking to make an impact, because I know that the Reform UK Party is hoping to stand and, in fact, deliberately deprive a lot of the Conservatives from winning in marginals next year, in order to essentially punish the Tories for not delivering on their Brexit promises, especially regarding controlling and lowering mass immigration. And as for the Liberal Democrats winning possibly in Somerton and Frome, we'll just have to see about that. But I mean, what have the Liberal Democrats really got to offer on any of the matters that concern disenchanted Conservatives? I can't think of anything that they've got to offer on those kind of matters. So why would you in fact vote for them at all? But that's the weird thing about the British democratic system, is that people just make their choices and we're stuck with it at the end of the day through the first past the post system. So it's going to be very interesting on Friday morning just to see what the results are there. But if the Tories take a tanking, then I think, as I say, that's a bellwether for next year and what we're going to be facing under Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour Party. They say a week's a long time in politics, so maybe things will change, but all will be revealed on Friday. Anybody, any thoughts on how these by-elections are going to go, just drop them in the comments, please, and we'll read them out. Hi to you, Robert. Oh, Adam, thank you. Frome, Frome is Froome. Froome. There you go. Froome. Thank you for that, Adam. Richard's viewing from the Perth, the medieval capital of Scotland. I was reading about Perth today. I will be talking about medieval Scotland in our On This Day in British History. Stephen says, by-elections are always a lottery. People use them as a protest vote. That's actually true, isn't it? Hard to judge on any result. You could be right, absolutely. People might just vote in all of these constituencies for Labour or Lib Dem and then be back to normal for them when it comes to the general election. It is often hard to tell, you're right. Here my pronunciation guide. Ruislip is Ruislip. No, Ruislip. Okay. That's interesting. South Ruislip. Am I saying that correct, Adam? Is there not a tube train, a tube stop, South Ruislip? Anyway, folks, we are teleprompter free on this show. We are teleprompter free, so we just take it as it comes, and we don't. You'll notice we're not reading anything out. Our eyes are not going side to side when we're speaking at all. So it's just teleprompter free, and so we make those mistakes regarding pronunciation. It's just the way we roll. Just the way we roll here. Christopher, yes, Ruislip. Got you. Thanks. Thanks to Adam and Christopher. Adam says, also in North Yorkshire is the Yorkshire Party, which is more of a nationalist party, which want devolution for Yorkshire. Pronounced Froome. Good, good. Adam says, Liberal Democrats don't really practice what they preach. They're a pro-EU party, and Brits voted 52% to leave against 48% to stay. Not very democratic if we have returned the will of the people. That's a good point, and it's been made by many people. Oh, here we go. Debbie's helping us out as well. Says that what I said was Cumanstown is pronounced Cumanston. 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 Who would have known from that spelling? Cumanston. Brilliant. I'm getting an education tonight. Thanks, Adam. Ruislip. Well, this chap, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name, says, with luck, the by-elections will doom the empty suit Sunak. And that devolution does not work as it is destructive of the union. It certainly appears to have been and is in the period that we've been suffering under it since 1999, more of which in a second, actually. And will the SNP have anyone left to stand, because they're all the proverbial jumping the proverbial sinking ship, aren't they? There was another one yesterday. Christopher believes that the Conservatives will take a hammering. People's standard of living has taken a belting, and immigration is a disaster. Labour will be more of a disaster, of course, in ways people can't even begin to imagine. I absolutely feel that. I absolutely feel that in ways that people won't even begin to imagine. But here's the thing with the British political system, is that legally Parliament is sovereign. Obviously the people are democratically sovereign when we vote, but we elect a legally sovereign Parliament which, during the period of its power, has the right to do whatever it wants. And some people think that's a bad thing, and certainly if you have a bad government and it just does what it wants, that it does appear to be a bad thing. But you can always hold out hope that there's going to be a good government will come in 4 or 5 years' time or sooner and overturn all of that through the power of what's called parliamentary sovereignty. And so parliamentary sovereignty and our common law, that is, we don't have a constitution, is actually quite a good thing, because it means that a good government can immediately overturn all the bad works of a bad government. Now, the Labour Party are, under Gordon Brown's ideological thinking, wants to overturn that concept of parliamentary sovereignty and wants to basically create a form of, if not a written constitution, it wants to bind Parliament in such a way that it's almost impossible to undo certain key matters that need to be undone. For example, he wants to bind devolution into the British Constitution in such a way that it will make it very, very difficult to even approach the question of devolution, let alone overturning elements of it. And I've become clearer on this in the past month or so, because when I was reading Gordon Brown's 155-page document called Messing Up the United Kingdom, it's not actually called that, it's called A New Britain, I couldn't understand why he kept saying that Britain was highly centralised. I'm like, you know better than me, Gordon. As a result of your devolution throughout the kingdom, it's very decentralised now. So why do you keep calling it centralised? And then I read an article that, while it didn't spell it out itself, helped me to clarify that what he's actually talking about when he talks about centralisation is parliamentary sovereignty. That's what he doesn't like. He doesn't like the fact that one parliament can come in and undo everything that the previous government did. And so he wants basically to have if Labour get elected, he wants to change the British Constitution in such a way that it will be almost impossible to undo anything that Labour does during its period of power. And this is what written constitutions do. And this is what happens when you set up a new chamber, which is what he wants to do, which is going to be elected, which is going to be challenging the main House of Commons. He's calling it his Assembly of Regions and Nations. So essentially what the Gordon Brown and the Labour Party are against at the moment, whether they go into the 2024 general election with this on the plate or not, I don't know. But what they're against at the moment is the concept of unlimited parliamentary sovereignty. The ability of any government to come in and overturn the works of the previous government. And so that's what they're trying to stop and trying to change and trying to ensure cannot happen again. And that's what they mean when they say Britain is centralised. They're talking about Britain has got this unique concept that the Parliament can do, that the Parliament is legally sovereign during its period of existence, and that it cannot bind another Parliament. That's what they mean when they talk about the centralisation of the United Kingdom. They're just really talking about the power of the British Parliament as presently constituted. And we don't always see that power happening, because what we've been suffering under in the last 50 years or so is that what I've just talked about there has never really happened. We've never actually had a government coming in and overturning what the previous government did. The Cameron government, for example, was really just a continuation of Blairism. And Cameron didn't undo a single thing that Blair had done, especially regarding devolution. In fact, he just continued to promote more and more and more of it. And so what I'm talking about there, about the ability of parliaments to come in and overturn what the previous parliament has done, that requires parties to actually want to do that. And we've not had that in the United Kingdom for a long while. We've really just had a kind of consensus where the Labour come in, they do a lot of stuff, the Tories come in and they keep all that the same and maybe do even more of it. And we've seen that with devolution, we've seen that with the Equalities Act, we've seen that with all the human rights stuff, and we've especially seen it with immigration as well, where when Blair opened the borders, it's been opened wider and wider with each successive government, including the present Conservative government. So the British Constitution does work, parliamentary sovereignty does work, but it requires parties to actually have different opinions from each other, significantly different opinions that they are willing to drive forward. And the present Conservatives have no such willingness to do that, whether it's on devolution or immigration control or turning back the woke ideologies which have been promoted by the equality and human rights religion. And talking about devolution, a colleague of mine sent me a paper earlier this week and asked me to fact check it before this person decided to publish it. And I was reading it, and this person made a point in it. They said that the Welsh Assembly elections, when they've been held, have never had over 50% of turnout. And I thought to myself, that can't be right. The first Welsh Assembly election was in 1999. Are you telling me that in the 6 that they've had since then, they've never had over 50% turnout? Because if that was the case, that means the Welsh Assembly has no democratic legitimacy by any measure of what represents democracy. Yet, in all these years since 1999, there's been various Welsh acts which have given that assembly, I think it calls itself a parliament now, have given it even more and more power. You're telling me it's never had over 50%? So I spent an hour just checking all of that, and lo and behold, it's absolutely correct. And let me bring up the figures for you, which will absolutely blow your mind. And I had not realised this until I actually went fact checking to make sure of this. Let's bring up the Welsh figures. And since 1999, there on the left-hand side are the figures from 99 through to 2021 and the turnouts at each Welsh Assembly election. Look, in 2003, 38.2% turnout. The highest was 46.6%, and that was in 2021, giving an average over that 22-year period of a 43.7% turnout. Now, if you look at the general elections, the British general elections in Wales, the turnouts have always been in the 60s. That's still that's not ideal, it's fairly lowish, but at least the average since 2001 over the last 6 British general elections in Wales has been 65%. But look at that, Welsh Assembly elections average 43.7% over the last 22 years. Okay. Now, there's no way, and we can get rid of that now, there's no way that represents any kind of democratic consensus, no kind of democratic basis for that at all. If you cannot possibly say that those kind of turnouts give the Welsh Senedd any democratic legitimacy whatsoever. You can't even get 47% of the people in Wales to vote at it. That's astonishing. Astonishing. That should have been prorogued years ago. In fact, I'm making up a new law here that if an institution doesn't get 50% of the vote at any election, that institution should be prorogued, by which I mean it should be discontinued, not dissolved, just discontinued until the next voting period comes around and you can go back to direct rule from Westminster during that particular period of time. And that should go as well. I'm going to stick my neck out here, and that should go for local elections as well. If you can't get over 50% of the local people to actually vote for the council or for whatever, then maybe you should prorogue the council and just go back to some kind of direct rule. Okay, I'm thinking that one on the hoof, but certainly as far as the Welsh Assembly is concerned, that should have been prorogued. As soon as it was realised you're not getting even 50% of people to vote for it, just close it down, try again in 4 years' time, see if the people want it then. But the fact that we've been paying billions of pounds for something, it's incredible. Incredible. Billions of pounds for something that over 50% of the people don't even vote at. Well, talking about devolved assemblies, the Scottish devolved Parliament has been in the news lately because I'll get onto that in a minute, but I'll read out some of your comments. Adam says at least Wales is led by a Unionist party. Well, nominally Unionist is the way that I would look at it. Debbie says Senedd is pronounced Senedd. Why is it spelled with 2 D's then? Okay, I'll take your word for it because I know that you're correct on that. Senedd, okay. And because Northern Ireland, the Northern Irish Parliament has essentially been prorogued, but Northern Ireland continues to exist. The bins still get collected. The roads still get repaired, I'm presuming. So lots of stuff can be done without actually having to have a devolved assembly to do it with. Here's an idea that what could happen is that the British Parliament could sit in Wales or in Scotland and listen to delegates of the counties and boroughs petitioning for policies, and then the MPs could introduce relevant local bills in Westminster. It's a thought. AB Trains says that billions of pounds spent on potentially causing the UK to self-destruct. Apparently 2 Ds make a th sound in somebody's universe. I'm going to say something controversial here. You know, the Welsh so-called government renamed the Brecon Beacons to this phrase, which is completely unpronounceable. And you could say, well, that's okay, that's an indigenous word. But what it also does is it's exclusive. It excludes people that can't pronounce that word or that particular language. So I didn't think that was a good idea. I'm all for emphasizing local distinctions and stuff like that, but not when you actually deliberately do it to exclude people who can't communicate that. And it seems a mistake to do that when it's a tourist attraction that's actually bringing in foreign people in order to make money from them. It seemed an odd thing to do when they renamed the Brecon Beacons in that way to an unpronounceable name for everybody who doesn't speak that particular language. And double L's make a cl sound. I can do that. Cl. McConnachie. I think I've been to McConnachie in the 1970s with a family holiday. Yes, the devolved parliaments are just glorified councils. Paul says we have mining villages here in Kent populated by people of Welsh, Scottish and Yorkshire extraction. They even have their own accent. Well, I'm glad it's still surviving as a distinct accent. This chap says Welsh language place names are actually being replaced by English names. Richard says it's just hijacking the Welsh language to make political points. Derek says, what's annoying is the council puts the council tax up and now in some locations do not know if all of Scotland and other regions of Scotland or the rest of the UK, but now have a charge of £25. Or less for OAP and unemployed for gardening, refuge, and sterling cost of collection is £50. That's serious. So, yeah, talking about the Scottish Parliament now, you know, one of the things that's been a bugbear for us all the time is the extent to which we're paying the British civil service to break up, to help the Scottish National Party break up Britain. Okay. Now, the civil service in Scotland is part of the wider British civil service, which is given the appellation the Home Civil Service. And the person in charge of the Home Civil Service is a cabinet member. He's in fact got the title the Cabinet Secretary, and his name is Simon Case. And he recently, maybe yesterday in Parliament, was quizzed, and he said that they're going to look into the guidance that's given to the civil service in Scotland around these particular matters. Now, we'll play the video in a moment, but before we play it, and before you listen to him, I want to make something very clear here. What the civil service in Scotland is doing when it helps the SNP break up Britain is perfectly legal. It's perfectly in accord with the civil service guidelines that they have to serve their so-called ministers, and they have to deliver the policies of the so-called ministers. You see, when the Civil Service Code was put together, nobody thought that the ministers would actually be wanting to destroy the very country that the civil service was from, that is to say, the United Kingdom. And so these guidelines are in fact totally in order, and the civil service in Scotland is doing exactly what it should legally. And they'll find, Simon Case will find when he looks at the guidance, that the guidance is largely correct. However, it's wrong for the situation. Politically, it's in error. And so what has to happen is that guidance has to be changed, and you can only change the guidance through new rules and new regulations which have to be passed by law by the British Parliament. So this isn't just a matter of maybe looking at the guidance. This is a matter of changing the law so that the British civil service is not involved in breaking up Britain itself. Now that's quite, what I've just said there is revolutionary to an extent that people like Simon Case are never, in the dying months of this administration, are never going to deal with, and are never going to accept, and are never going to do. But just so you know who this guy is, and just so you can kind of feel his vibe and his energy, we want to just play this first video. Now, it starts with a Scotsman who is the former Advocate General. He's a good guy. He's called Lord Keane, Richard Keane, and he's quizzing Simon Case. And Simon Case is the chap in the white shirt and tie. And let's just listen to what he says. And then there's one video, and then there's a shorter video afterwards. Once we played the first video, we'll come back to me, then we'll play the second video. Okay, let's roll the first video.
That we're addressing the question of further guidance for the civil servants in Scotland.
So I think actually because specific instances have arisen that we think need looking at, that we thought the guidance was clear, but actually, I think we've had, reason to look at, various instances and uses of money, so we're looking at it now.
Yes, but as you say, it goes back to 2014 at least, and we've had instances of so-called embassies being set up abroad. We've had instances of policies being pursued with regard to independence and therefore within the area of reserved matters. Why is it, as I reiterate, only now that the question of further guidance is being addressed? Why wasn't it addressed years ago?
So I can't answer for sort of, years ago. I assume it's because predecessors thought that the guidance that was there was adequate. But, as I say, I have reason, in a number of instances now, where it's been, brought to my attention. So I am now discussing with ministers. We're looking at the propriety and ethics of it. Indeed, if necessary, we'll consult the Civil Service Commission about it. Because, to come back to the sort of rather important point that flows through all of this, is actually the integrity of the impartiality of our civil service is something we all want to protect, which is why I want to make sure that civil servants operating in Scotland have very clear guidance about what they cannot do, because they deserve that protection, and the whole civil service requires them to have that protection and guidance.
The Permanent Secretary in Scotland and the civil servants in Scotland need to know when they're still operating within the requirements of the Civil Service Code.
They certainly do. They want to, and to be clear, I believe that they have been looking at these edge cases diligently. But as I say, I want to go back round them all, with colleagues in Scotland, but with ministers, to make sure we are doing absolutely what we should to protect and preserve that impartiality.
That's very helpful.
Well, as I say, it's not guidance that's the guidance that they're following. They're following the guidance correctly. It's new laws to stop that particular type of guidance, which is wrong. You know, they're being guided to do wrong things. They're obeying the law. It's the guidance is wrong, so the guidance has to change. He's just looking at it. Oh, are they following the guidance? Yes, they are following the guidance. It's the guidance that has to change. But there's no sign in what he just said there that they were going to change the guidance in order to stop them doing what they're doing. And the last few seconds of the, let's just play the second video, which only just
you know, with colleagues in Scotland, but with ministers, to make sure we are doing absolutely what we should to protect and preserve that impartiality.
That's very helpful. When are we going to see the guidance?
So I hope it will be weeks.
Thank you.
I hope it will be weeks. Oh man, that's the front line, okay? That's the front line of trying to stop the civil service in Scotland from destroying the United Kingdom. Do you have any faith whatsoever in that in what he's even saying? In any faith that he can do anything about this? As I say, in the dying months of this administration, and Lord Keane was quite right. This has been going on since at least 2014. It's actually been going on since 2007 when the SNP took over Holyrood. But even just going back 10 years, all of this should have been sorted back then. New laws being brought in, and the Civil Service Code shaked about, and very clear that we are not going to be spending millions of pounds breaking up our own country. So at least one good thing is that they're looking at the guidance. So I guess that's better than just like lying in bed doing nothing, which is what they've been doing for the past years. But as I say, they need to do more than look at the guidance. They need to change the law, and that requires Parliament to bring in a new law so that if you do try to break up the United Kingdom, you go to jail. The guidance is clearly wrong, says Christopher. It's slowing the SNP to take advantage. It's allowing the SNP to take advantage all the time. D. Stanner says Mr. Case looks totally disinterested. Doesn't he just? Absolutely. He is the best cabinet secretary for waffling unconvincingly in a completely disinterested manner. That should be his new title. Cabinet Minister for waffling unconvincingly in a completely disinterested manner. Who would rather be back in his bed. Oof, I saw that and my heart just fell. Absolutely, D. Stanners. Exactly. Surely Case needs to be driven by the Prime Minister, but that will never happen with Sunak. We need a Prime Minister with the proverbial. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, because we see all this stuff, we wrote, of course, our famous article, A Law to Stop the Civil Service Pushing the Indie Agenda. 6 paragraphs. And you can find that in our magazine, Do More Together. And we'll also put the link out. You'll find that in the threads, A Law to Stop the Civil Service Pushing the Indie Agenda. Right next to another article, Stop Calling It a Scottish Government. So important. So important. Now, talking about what time is it? It's well past time for On This Day in British History. Now, folks, after On This Day in British History, I'll ask a question about that history, and the winner will receive an AFFG badge worth a £5, a fantastic Royal Air Force Typhoon display team coffee, and we're going to chuck in a Proud to be British badge as well. So don't say we're not good to you, folks. So On This Day in British history, and the first thing on this day was a battle between, modern historians for ease will say the Scots versus the English, but basically it was a battle between a load of Scots who supported the descendant of Robert the Bruce and a load of Scots and English who supported Edward Balliol, the descendant of King John Balliol of Scots. Basically, Edward Balliol wanted to become the King of Scots, and he had already invaded Scotland 2 or 3 months earlier by sea at Fife and crowned himself at Scone. And this was during the period when David II was the rightful king, or at least he was a child at the time. And so he had his regents who opposed the claims of Edward Balliol. And Edward Balliol was also backed by the English king Edward III, who saw also the main chance in getting his man Edward Balliol in there into Scotland. So, to cut a long story short, a big fight ensued on this day back in 1333 at Berwick upon Tweed, and it's called the Battle of Halidon Hill, and it's perhaps not particularly well known, but it's considered to be a battle that, the Scots lost very badly, and a lot of the Scottish nobility were killed at it, many through the power of the English archers, or at least the archers of Edward Balliol and Edward III, firing down upon the King David's army, which was led by Sir Archibald Douglas. So a big day in Scottish feudal history, and unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, quite bloody and decimated a lot of the Scots at the Battle of Halidon Hill. And we've got a couple of pictures of Halidon Hill now. Let's put up the first one. I guess that's meant to be Edward III at what's imagined to be the gates of Berwick upon Tweed, about to fight the Scots. And we've got another picture here of the actual hill itself, Halidon Hill, which sits above Berwick upon Tweed. Looks a pretty sparse hill to die on, that, I have to say. Okay, something very interesting about that Halidon is it comes from the word holydom, which comes from the concept of a holy dome, a bit like a kingdom or a kingdom. A holy dome, a Halidon. And in the next issue of Union Heart, which is going to be a 16-pager dedicated to the Scottish and British monarchy, we've been researching it, and we've been researching in particular Scottish coronation oaths in the medieval and also the later period as well, trying to discover what they were about and what they were saying and things like that. And we discovered a cracker that was alleged and very possibly is a Scottish coronation oath from 1445, which is listed in a Scottish parliamentary document. And the king ends by saying, "So help me God and this holy dome," which is a word you just never hear. Never hear. And then I was researching for this day in history and I found this word Halidon. I'm like, that's holy dome. Strange how things come together. And you could also pledge back in 1445 an oath of loyalty to the king, which ends, "So help me God and my own hand and this holy dome and all holy domes." Fascinating. Anyway, so that was the Battle of Holy Dome, or Halidon Hill, on this day back in 1333. And another thing on this day as well, and we're sticking with the battles, this was an SAS battle in Oman back in 1972, when 9 SAS troopers held out and defeated around about 300 communists from South Yemen during the Dhofar rebellion in Oman. And they were there, the SAS were there to help the Omani government to train its soldiers to fight this group which called itself the Popular Front for the Liberation of the Occupied Arabian Gulf. And the rebels wanted to reach the port of Mirbat in Oman, and they had to take the British Army training team fort just outside Mirbat. And we've got a picture which shows the area in which the conflict occurred from the sky, and that's it there. And that big building on the right is the main fort in that little complex where the British Army were stationed, and or rather where the 9 SAS were stationed along with various local soldiers. And so when they were attacked, they held out against the Popular Front, and they killed 80 of the enemy, but unfortunately suffered 3 dead, 2 of which were SAS troopers. And especially noted in the fight was the actions of Staff Sergeant Laba, who was from Fiji, 30 years old, and he spotted an artillery piece which was positioned next to the fort and which was unmanned, and he raced towards it and started operating it himself, firing a shot a minute through this artillery weapon, a 25-pounder. And he was spotted doing that, and another Fijian soldier, Trooper Takavisi, ran over to assist him, and then 2 British soldiers, Mike Keeley and Trooper Tobin, also ran over, but unfortunately in the fight both Tobin and Laba were killed. And we've got a picture here of Laba. He is now buried. He was returned to Britain and he was buried in the cemetery at St. Martin's Church in Hereford. But a great hero. A great hero. And he was named one of BBC 4's 60 New Elizabethans in celebration of Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee in 2012. And I think that's how we first got to hear about his brave act. But interestingly, he didn't get any particular medal for it, although he was awarded the British Empire Medal, but he didn't achieve any award for gallantry. But he certainly did his bit, and eventually the firefight ended when the Omani Air Force arrived to drive back the insurgents. Okay. So, the British always fighting, it seems. Alan says, interesting, have read about that battle, a victory against all odds. Richard said it's Scone Palace. Did I say scone? Scone. You're right, Richard, it absolutely is Scone. Brave souls, says Catherine. Okay, folks, we've got a question coming up about on this day in British history, and please send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll announce the winner in 10 minutes at the top of the hour. And the winner can get a Force for Good badge, a Proud to be British badge, and I love this, I really do love this, Royal Air Force Typhoon Display Team coffee. Brilliant. Send your answers, folks, and if you haven't done it before, you've got a good chance of winning. You really do. Take it from me. contact@aforceforgood.uk. So the question is, on this day, the Battle of Mirbat involved a famous British regiment. What was the name of the British regiment involved in that conflict today at the Battle of Mirbat in Oman back in 1972? Send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Good. Now, I want to talk to you about AYR on Saturday the 29th. Now, the SNP supporters and the ALBA supporters are having another one of their marches. It's what we want to do is we want to obviously film them and count them. So if you're in Ayr on Saturday the 29th of July, I should say 29th of July, then if you think you can film them on your mobile phone and get the footage to us, then please contact us. That's great activism. So we're looking for somebody to film the AUOB march on Saturday the 29th of July in Ayr. That's not this Saturday, it's next Saturday. Also, we're going to be out later this month again with our street stall. Anybody who would like to join us, please simply contact us at aforceforgood.uk, and we'll tell you where and when that's going to be. Always looking for people to help us on our street stall, especially people who've never come out before. You're in good hands. You're among people who have done this many times before, who know exactly how to guide you in that effort. So please, if you're interested in coming out with us on our street stall, which will be later this month, please do contact us about that. Okay, so that's two pieces of activism. In addition to activism, we've got two major writing projects which are coming up over the next 2 months. The first is our 16-page new magazine, Union Heart. That will be issue 9, and is going to be dedicated, as I said earlier, to Scotland and the monarchy. And we're going to be looking at the British monarchy from a Scottish perspective. And we're breaking new ground with the articles which will appear in this 16-pager. It's going to be absolutely an education, as all our magazines are. But this is really an education. We've been acquiring, as we always do, a lot of interesting materials. We've been going to the library, finding lots of new and old articles on this particular matter about coronations in Scotland. Here's one here, the medieval Scottish coronation service from the Innis Review. Okay, stuff that we've not just been downloading or paying for, but getting from the libraries and photocopying old style. A lot of stuff. We're going to bring it together. We'll have an entire reference page as well, and it will really be something that will be valuable for years and years to come, because there's nobody else can actually do this kind of stuff, and nobody's got the time, effort ability or inclination to do it, but we do have that time, effort, inclination and ability. So please do, if you like that idea, if you like the idea of our 16-page magazine, which we're going to call King and Country, if you like the idea of that, if you'd like to see that in publication, because that's what we don't have. We don't have the cash at the moment to publish it. So if you'd like to see it in publication, do drop us a wee donation at aforceforgood.uk/donate, and we'll just keep that. We'll keep the donate thing up here, so that you know how to help us. There we go. There it is. Now, great. Looks like we have got a winner for our competition. Would you believe? Already we've got a winner. And absolutely will be highly useful for journalists, Christopher, and for home education as well, because goodness me, you're not taught anything about it. Talking about that, before we bring up the winner, we've got a video here that will play. I was interviewed by the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, at the King Charles Service of Dedication on Wednesday the 5th of July, and one of our people caught it on the mobile phone, and I'm not sure if the BBC used any of the footage, but let's just play it just now.
How important was it for you to be out here today?
So it's so important because we've got to remind the Scots of our history and heritage, because so much of it is going by the way. So many people are not aware of our Scottish heritage. So many people don't know that Charles is in fact the rightful King of Scots, that he is directly descended from Robert the Bruce. So many people don't know that because maybe, I don't know, maybe they were taught history in school or whatever, but we're here just to remind them of that fact. And in fact, this phrase is not a phrase that you see very often, so my organisation, of course, the Good is trying to popularise that phrase and help us to understand the relevance of this for Scotland's tradition, for Scotland's heritage, and Scotland's inheritance of what we have accomplished from the past and what we have today, and what we're going to see today later in the afternoon, some amazing displays of Scottish heritage.
Lovely, thanks, Alistair.
You're welcome.
I don't know how much of that you could catch, but that video is up on our TikTok page, and we were interviewed by a lot of people that day, actually. I'm not sure that BBC reporter was actually, when she found out I was pro-monarchy, because she had to ask me, right, because I'm holding a thing that said Charles, King of Scots, and she actually had to ask me was I pro or anti-monarchy. So that wasn't a good start. And then when she found out that we definitely were, you could just tell she wasn't that keen to continue the interview, which I found interesting. Surprise, surprise. Okay, so do we have a winner? We asked the question. We asked the question that on this day, in 1972, there was a battle in Oman, and the question was, what British regiment was involved in this fight, and the answer was the SAS. And the winner is Chris Glenn. Fantastic. Great stuff, Chris. We'll get that sent to you tomorrow in the post. Thanks very much for your participation, Chris. And you're going to look forward to this, that's for sure. The Royal Air Force Typhoon coffee. We've tried it. It's very tasty. Good. Well, folks, it's the top of the hour, 8 o'clock exactly. We didn't have a guest tonight. Now, as you will have noticed, next week we're not going to be broadcasting because I've got more research and writing to do for this magazine, King and Country. And then when that's out the way, I'm going to be writing the book, or a book, which is going to be first in a series, and we're aiming to get that out before the end of the year as well. So those were two projects. I'll speak more about them next time I'm back, but I won't be back next Wednesday, but we'll be back the week after, and we should have a guest on as well. So it just remains for me to say thanks for watching. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next time.